Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to welcome Hrvoje Morić, the host of Geopolitics and Empire podcast. For more than a decade, Hrvoje has brought together some of the sharpest minds from around the world, helping us understand the major forces shaping our future. From shifting global power to the rise of digital control, his work has really become a central hub for anyone who wants to see the bigger picture. So welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
It's great to be here. It's an honor to be on your show. And I was just telling you, I was in Israel many moons ago. I think it was around 2017, and I spent my wife and I spent 3 weeks there, and it was a wonderful experience.
You're welcome to come back. It will be my pleasure. So you've spent years analyzing the major shift shaping the world. I would love for you to help us map out the main threats humanity is facing today from your perspective. So, what do you see as the most urgent and critical issues we need to understand right now?
So it's shifted since I started the podcast. I count the start from 2012 of my podcast. It was Dissident Thinker initially when I started skyping in experts into my classroom. That's on YouTube, and then in 2015 I formalized the podcast. And geopolitics and empire for me. When I studied geopolitics, I learned that geopolitics is like the study. It's like the science of everything, how everything works. When you mash together geography and demographics and political science and the hard sciences, and that help allows you to, from a scientific perspective, understand what's going on. And then empire for me refers to sort of like globalism, right? This push by an occult elite for totalitarian one world state. And over time I started more with the geopolitics early on, but at this late stage in the game I find that our biggest threats are, there are a number of definitions that are synonymous. So, for example, technocracy, algocracy, people call it the electronic concentration camp, right? Cyber gulag, digital gulag. I had the Jewish historian many years back, 5 years ago, when COVID started. Like, I understood what was really happening. Edwin Black, right, who wrote the book
Mm.
on IBM and the Holocaust and how IBM created the first paper computers to
He's also
classify. Uh-huh.
he's also an expert on eugenics, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and I would actually say eugenics is one of the top topics today, which it's very disguised. I often say climate changeism. I like to call climate changeism is eugenics rebranded, and they're creating. So for me, the most important topics are effectively this move towards a world state, which is in just this morning. I was reading the Prime Minister of China was talking about Xi Jinping's new initiative called Global Governance Initiative. And he was effectively saying that this is UN 2.0 or World Government 2.0. And so you've got that problem because that's problematic for all peoples of the world because they want to centralize and concentrate power to control all nations. And that's totalitarian, number one, and number two, the means they have to do this now, which is the digitalization of everything, right? Internet was a military weapon created by Pentagon DARPA, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it was created for expressly this purpose where we find ourselves in now. And so for me, those are the most important. There are wars. I'm a Christian, so Jesus said there will always be the poor with you. There will always be wars. But what I find interesting that in our time, it seems I felt like in the past the wars were a little more organic, so to speak,
Hmm.
more realistic or authentic. And I find the wars today almost it's like we're both sides of the spectrum uh, are kind of in on it.
It's a
They're
controlled dialectic, I think.
basically, yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of why I focused less on the wars and more on the real game at hand from all sides, which is this. I mean, isn't it funny how the Chinese and the Russians and the Western powers are all on board with this global state at
Hmm.
which they want to be technocratic. So effectively, those two nodes for me are the most important. And I ask most of my guests tend to agree that this is the most important at this stage because Once they have this in place, they can just press a button and I can't buy food anymore. I'm going to starve to death. And so, like what Edwin Black called the algorithm ghetto, comparing it to the physical ghettos Jews were put in. And he calls it, you will be zombied. You will become a non entity. You will effectively be unpersoned. And they don't have to send, whether it was Soviet Union, pick your totalitarian regime. They don't have to send Gestapo to your house anymore. They just press
Mhm.
the button and you can't, no one's going to help you. You can't buy food. You're just going to, a few weeks' time, you'll starve to death. And, that's it. So,
Yeah, not to mention that complete dependency on the system, which will produce endless amount of people who are basically useless eaters. They have nothing to provide, but they are completely dependent on the system. So lately, for example, the Prime Minister of Britain, England, was speaking about the digital ID, and I am positive that eventually they are going to connect it to some kind of CBDC or whatever it is. Can you speak about that, please? What
yeah,
do you
so
see?
this project, it's happening in every single country. Um, you have, and because every country is different, the histories are slightly different, the development is different. They use different pretexts according to the country to sell this same solution. So in the
Yes.
United States, there's a little bit more freedom, let's say in the US, guns and speech and constitution, and the states, 50 states. And so it's a harder nut to crack in the US. And so they're pushing real ID in the US. And, in the US, your driver's license is the eminent ID versus other
Mhm.
countries where you have, in Mexico, where I am, it's the voter ID. In another, in European countries like in Croatia, I'm Croatian also, we have the national ID. And so the digital ID, in the US, they're trying to push it through the driver's licenses, the real ID they want everybody to get. Here in Mexico, they just announced this summer. First, they were going to push it through the voter ID in Mexico. Now they have pivoted to what's known as the biometric CURP. So all Mexicans, and including foreigners, if you want to open a bank account or do anything, you have to get it's like a population registry number. It's got a very eugenicist sound to it, doesn't
Mhm.
it? CURP.
Yeah.
It's like, and so now that it's analog, but now they want you to go back to the office and give your iris scans and your fingerprints to get your biometric CURP, without which you will literally not be able to do anything. And in digital ID now, I call him Adolf Starmer or Keir Stalin. Um,
Yeah. Very good.
you won't be able to work without digital ID. And this is why I said in March or April of 2020 specifically that COVID was about bringing in global algocracy, ruled by algorithm or AI. Because you notice in COVID, you were not allowed to work in most places unless you had a digital COVID passport certificate. And now compared to Starmer saying you won't be able to work unless you have a digital ID, you can clearly see it's the same thing. And COVID was a test run, or maybe an intent to kick off that process and see how far they can push it through. It didn't, they couldn't get it through. And so now migration, it's like I said earlier, migration is the different pretext to implement the same solution. And so effectively, digital ID, what they want is everyone to have a digital wallet, so to speak, and then you have to have a digital online identity that will be connected with the government and all private services. So you have your digital identity, which then it's linked to your digital wallet, and then that wallet will be connected to the forms of spending, and they don't even have to be CBDCs. What I find, a lot of the global elites, you got the World Banks, the IMFs, the Bank of International Settlements, the central banks,
Mhm.
the commercial banks, retail banks. Now you're getting online banks, fintechs that don't have, like the Revolut or Wise or things like this. I think what they're creating is an interoperable system. So you won't necessarily even need a CBDC, but effectively what's going to happen is cash won't be accepted and you'll have to pay through some digital means, whether it's a CBDC in some countries or in others, what I call a PBDC, private bank, their digital currency, or a US dollar stable coin or some cryptocurrency. At the end of the day, that doesn't really matter because what matters is that it's going to have to be a digital payment. I give you an example. What happened to me last week? I was so blown away. So we went to the river for the day, into nature, the
Hmm.
family,
Yes.
and I didn't make my morning coffee at home, which I usually do, or have a breakfast. And I thought I'll get something on the way. Okay, and there was a Starbucks, and I'm like, okay, we stopped. You know, it's on the way out to the nature here in Mexico, and the Starbucks, well, the line was too long, like really, long. I'm not going to wait 30 minutes, 40 minutes for a coffee, and so there was a Burger King. I almost never frequent a Burger King. I was like, okay, I'll just get a coffee and like a bacon cheese whatever sandwich.
Hmm.
And I walk into the Burger King, and this is illustrative of the shape of things to come. And not all of the Burger King establishments are like this in the city where I am in Mexico, but this one just happened to be this futuristic dystopian version. So I walk in, and there's two big menu screens, and then you have the counter. Like when the old days, you walk into the counter and there's people there, the human
Hmm.
workers, and you make your order. And I asked them in Spanish, I'm like, can I order with you guys? And like, no, no, like you cannot order with the humans anymore, even though they're there at the counter. They point to the machine. You do it through the machine. And I didn't have my cell phone, and I only have cash, which is, one of the ways to resist for
Yes.
now these systems, because you want to maintain privacy. The whole point is neither the governments or the corporations know what you're buying, right? You have this freedom. Privacy comes at a premium. And so um, I was frustrated. And so, okay, I'm clicking on the menu. It asks me if I want to donate. I'm like, this the Red Cross? This is Burger King. It's a business. I give you money, you give me food. Why am I going to donate to you? And then it's Byzantine and Kafka-esque. So, you click on your coffee, it kicks you out to another menu. Okay, whatever. I finally get the coffee and sandwich. The final move to put your order in, it says, give me a 4-digit PIN. I'm like, what 4-digit PIN? I don't know what you're talking about. Or the menu says, scan the QR code. Scan it with what? I don't have a cell phone. So I literally could not buy food. I muttered under my breath. I cursed out loud in Croatian, and I
Hmm.
just stormed out of the establishment. I literally could not buy food. So that's kind of an example of this future where you won't be able to use cash. You'll have to have a cell phone. And then when you make the purchase, it'll either be through a physical credit card, or now they want the contactless, where you just contactless credit card, debit card, or your phone through NFC payment, or more likely the facial recognition or palm payments, which is sounds like the Book of Revelation, where the mark on your head or forehead, where
Sign of the
many
beast. Yeah.
right, where they're now putting in place payments through your palm scan or your digital, because your face, that's the whole onboarding with the biometrics and the digital ID everywhere, like UK and everywhere else. So they'll have your face, facial biometrics and eye and palm and fingerprints that will then be linked to your wallet, digital identity, and whatever payment system you're using, your bank, your Google Pay, your Apple Pay, your crypto account. And so effectively, if you're a dissident, um, it'll scan your face, you'll go to pay, and it says, sorry, payment rejected. And so that's ultimately, I think, this is being built out everywhere. I had a Russian listener of my podcast who I met
Hmm.
when I went to Russia years ago, and who sold me memorabilia. He sells like things like that, and we stayed in touch. And we tried to call each other the other week on Telegram, and we couldn't do it because he says the Russian government banned voice calls on Telegram or WhatsApp, and
Wow.
that you had to download the Max app. It's the government approved app for all Russians. Like you have WeChat in China, they copied WeChat to make Max app in Russia. So that way the government can see everything you're doing. And in America, they're working on the same thing. Elon Musk is at the tip of that spear, where he's openly said, we want to create for Twitter X, to be the WeChat for the West. So you can see X has now accelerated its development, where you can make calls on X now. They're bringing in payments. You can pay through X. So
Hmm.
you can see every region of the world is working on this.
I understand. Many people are thinking that Trump is some kind of savior. He's here to help us, to save us. I think that's, especially with what I saw during the so-called 12 days war with Iran, I saw that he sold us out completely. We can go to that later if you want, but the most important thing for me, I can see, especially when I listen to Patrick Wood, who was on this channel, and Courtney Turner, for example, she spoke about the Dark Enlightenment and these PayPal mafia guys and the Silicon Valley. And it seems like J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and the philosopher, what's his name,
Curtis
Curtis
Yarvin.
Yarvin,
Yeah.
yeah, all of them are like pushing the agenda through Trump, who also was so kind to introduce Operation Warp Speed, with the lovely injections. So, what do you see happening in the States? Because usually what's happening there is going to echo everywhere else, especially in Israel. How do they bring about this technocratic stranglehold through Trump and the people around him?
I mean, they're already doing it. I saw the news this morning. Bukele, Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, who's lauded, right? But most of these people are globalists, wittingly or unwittingly. They use Bukele as an example, like in relation to Trump. He just signed a genetic verification law. I saw this morning, which if you watch the movie Gattaca with Ethan, is it Ethan Hawke and Gwyneth Paltrow, fantastic science fiction movie,
Mhm.
where in the future there will be two types of humans: the organic humans, which will be like on the lower tier two humans, and the genetically modified humans. And then there will be checkpoints everywhere where they test your DNA to make sure you're this, modified, like Klaus Schwab talks about merging man with machine. You'll be this,
So-
you'll
yeah.
the transhumans, the biohacked humans will be, grade A, and then everyone else who refuses to become transhuman will be like the janitors and street cleaners. And so Bukele passes this genetic verification law, and I've been warning about all of like what you're alluding to. It's like, oh yeah, Bukele got rid of the crime, which is a good thing, but they always play this long game. And what did he do? He gave an interview a few years ago where he said we should copy the supranational globalist European Union and create a Central American Union. Bukele said that. And now coming to Trump, yeah, as you mentioned, you've got all of these people behind the technocracy movement, right? Elon Musk's grandfather
For
was
Canada,
part of
yeah.
Joshua Haldren. I think Haldren is his last name, and then obviously Elon Musk is part of that movement, and then all of these people you mentioned: Yarvin, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp. The list goes on and on. Their job is to sell this dystopia to the populace. So Trump is that sale to the American people, because there'd be no other way to do it. If you did it through a left wing, Biden, Kamala Harris candidate and party, a lot of America is
Too much
conservative.
resistance, yeah.
Right. It'd be too obvious. He'd be like, here comes Adolf Hitler to implement. Like, no, everyone's be like, no, no, no. But if you take that sort of that symbolism of the Antichrist in the Bible, the way that evil is going to come in is through the front door, waving a Bible in its hand with a
Through the man
suit.
of peace, right?
Right, through a man of peace. I think of the movie Book of Eli, which was a great movie with Denzel Washington and Gary Oldman. And Denzel Washington is carrying the last Bible to Alcatraz, and he's passing through the town of Gary Oldman, who's this crazed out dictator, and he wants to get his hand on that Bible so that he can indoctrinate, twist the scripture to control the populace. And that's kind of like what I feel like we're seeing today. Like, you see all this fake Christianity around Trump. Paula White, who, from my interpretation of the Bible, you cannot have women uh, pastors and teachers, like in that sense.
Mhm.
And all of these prosperity gospel fake Christianity, and then they're merging it with war. You see Secretary of War. I got to get used to saying not Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, right? He's doing
Mhm.
these commercials, which are like cosplay. He did like a trailer for Top Gun. I don't know if you saw that the other week, where he's flying in these fighter jets, and then in the background is all this war porn, right? Jets and soldiers, and he's praying a prayer from the Bible. I'm like, this is blasphemy, if you ask me. And so
Absolutely.
it's really dangerous. And so I've effectively, I said long ago, Trump, MAGA, and the administration is the new world order. It's the Trojan horse. And that's why Bukele, I also warn, he seems to also be a Trojan horse, because he's bringing in Bitcoin, which is the onboarding to the digital currency, which we talked about, and then he's talking about copying the EU in the Central America, and then the Trump administration pushing North American Union, which so many of us talked about for 20 years, right? We should stop it. And now he's like, yeah, let's annex Greenland and Canada and USA and Mexico and Panama. And so,
Which is exactly like you can see on the book that they published in the 1930s. There is a map that shows Greenland and or even Mexico was included in Panama, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. And I had the last interview. The father of the North American Union, that was some people gave him the nickname Dr. Robert Pastor. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he published the book called the North American. Well, first it was a white paper from Foreign Affairs. I think it was called the North American Community, and then it became a book. I've got it behind me, the North American Idea. I met him because he visited our campus here where I live in Mexico to promote North Americanism, and I conducted the last interview with him in December 2013 on my old channel, Dissident Thinker, and he passed a month later, I think, from cancer. But yeah, he was promoting a North American union, and I think that's what is at play right now. I think it's no wonder that the next World Cup is going to be in Canada, USA, and Mexico. Is that a coincidence? It's definitely not. And then my fear is this idea of a civil war in America. That I think this narrative of a civil war is coming from the elite themselves and from the alternative media that is linked to the elite. So they want a civil war. We can talk about this later. I think some of the alternative media is going a little schizo and crazy and conspiracy theory in the true sense of the word. But the whole Charlie Kirk event, I think that was a deep event. It was carried out by the globalist deep state for the purpose of radicalizing both the left and the right, because they put out the movie Civil War. They just put out another movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Benicio del Toro about Civil War. They want I used to have a classmate in Geneva who was from Saudi Arabia, and he joked with us. He said, if you want to know what U.S. policy, foreign policy is going to be in the future, just look at Hollywood, because you saw in the 1980s, 1990s, all these, and I grew up on this stuff, all these Middle Eastern terrorist movies.
yes.
Chuck Norris, Delta Force. I love that movie. And then what happened? Al Qaeda, 9/11, global war on terror, blah blah blah. And then we saw the movies in the 2010s of pandemic, Contagion, the British TV show 2013, Utopia, which was remade in 2019, the American version with John Cusack. And then what happens? COVID. And then now you have the UFO alien stuff, which is one psyop down the line, but the Civil War stuff. And so I think they're trying. So Americans they're not ready to go fight each other yet. Like, most people are lazy, they work and they enjoy their fast food and Amazon and Netflix. Like, why would I go fight? And so they're trying to radicalize the Civil War aspect, and Mexico add on to that this potential invasion of Mexico. Today, NBC News announced, it's on my Twitter. Where is it? Right here. I just a few seconds ago posted it. Trump administration is planning a new mission in Mexico against cartels, like the movie Sicario. And the situation in Mexico, this is what they often do. They put us in between a rock and a hard place where both options suck. So I have to tell you, for Mexico, the situation is bad in terms of cartels and crime. Like, it's really bad. They chop people's heads off, they blow them up, they burn them to death, they extort everyone possible. So it's a real problem. But in an ideal world, you wouldn't want the U.S. to invade Mexico. but it's kind of like both those options suck. But I can tell you that because you think of global war and terror, and I don't think Al Qaeda did 9/11, right? I think
Of course not.
that was a false flag operation. So in
Yes.
that sense, Al Qaeda, ISIS seem to be largely manufactured enemies by the West. So those, I felt like those were a false threat. Maybe in some parts of Africa and Middle East, you have real jihadis that are doing things, but the level of that,
But
I think,
someone
is
actually have to sponsor them, and I think everything eventually leads to the Five Eye, the clandestine organization. I don't think anything happens unless they permit it or support it.
and I wanted to contrast that with Mexico, where I think this actually is a genuine threat. These, because I've lived here, and
Hmm.
the stories that I hear, and I speak the language. I'm a citizen. I read the news. We had a mayor 2 days ago, the seventh mayor to be assassinated, and this is making big news now in Mexico and beyond. He was taken out by the cartels in a public Day of the Dead event where there were children and the public, and people are saying, and this was a mayor in Michoacan who said, I'm going to fight the corruption, I'm going to fight the cartels. He asked the president for help, who refused to give him help, and now everyone's telling the president to stand down, and it's a narco government. So it's not the same as the case with like Al Qaeda and stuff. But as to your point, we probably have some connection between US intelligence and the cartels,
Hmm.
but it really is a huge problem here. And now, so they put us in this position where we don't want to keep living with these cartels. We don't want to invasion or attack from the US. But I've even listened to patriotic nationalist Mexicans who, if you choose between the two options, they would go with the US attacks. And I'm telling you, that's not, my history of geopolitics and empire. I'm
Hmm.
against intervention, but I'm even telling you, like, it's really that bad with the cartels that I would say, like, okay, yeah, come and get them, because we don't know what else to do.
It's too
But
extreme already. Yeah.
it's too extreme. But I would, just to circle back, then I think this could all be used to accelerate North American Union integration, the Balkan model, because I'm from the Balkans as well, and the EU was born out of World War. They had the World War, and the solution was this regional
It was
world.
first the League of Nations, the
Right.
first.
Well,
Yeah.
League of Nations, and then United Nations. But the EU is like the regional model for, let's say, world government, technocratic, totalitarian world government, and that was born out of war. And then you had the war in Yugoslavia in the 90s. And so that super state of Yugoslavia was broken into pieces through a war, and then each small piece was reintegrated into the EU. Slovenia, Croatia, they're working on Macedonia and Serbia and Bosnia. So I could see them using that same model from World War II and Yugoslavia in North America. In other jurisdictions, they don't have to, they can do it more peacefully. Like Africa already has the African Union, and they're working on a common passport and common currency. You have ASEAN, the Southeast Asian Union, the Asian Union. It's already, they don't need a war there because the population there is very statist and
Hmm.
collectivist minded.
Yes,
So they're
absolutely.
like, oh, this is great. We don't, this is wonderful. All we care about is money and a good economic situation. We don't care about freedom and liberty and that stuff. And
That's
America is, yeah.
that's why they want to destroy the West, because the West is the producer of human rights and the understanding of individual responsibility and things like that. So all the other let's say civilizations are very collective in their understanding of, yeah. So it's very easy to basically attack the West with those collective, uncompatible kind of cultures, and destroy the fabric and the, how do you say it, homogenic society there.
And to that point, there was a very important data point or data signal from 1 or 2 weeks ago, speaking to this, that crystallizes um, Lutz's trust. So to get esoteric here, and I think people who analyze globalism, geopolitics, who leave out the spiritual dimension, have a huge blind spot in their analysis. And the Lutz's trust. So just the quick history, theosophy. In my view, that's basically Satanism, Luciferianism, where these theosophists, very New Age, Gnostic, and in the 1800s, you had a woman called Helena Blavatsky, who was a
Mhm.
theosophist, and she had a
Yeah.
magazine called Lucifer Magazine, and she influenced a lot of this stuff. You've got like Rudolf Steiner and then other people like this. And Alice Bailey in 1922 founded Lucifer Publishing, and they have 3 offices: New York, London, and Geneva, and they're part of the UN. They're on the ECOSOC, Economic and Social Council of the UN, so they're affiliated officially with the UN, and they changed the name to Lucis Trust. But if you
Yeah.
read their material, they say that this world leader in the biblical perspective would be this antichrist figure. They paint him as the inverse. So they call him Lucifer or Prometheus, and they say he is the Christ. And they say he's also the Maitreya to the Eastern religions, he's the Mahdi to the Muslims, and
Yeah.
that this figure is here now, but that we have to prepare the world population to unveil him, the externalization of the hierarchy. And what was my point? That they recently, in their recent newsletter, to your point, they specifically discussed converging East and West. Um, and they were talking about Xi Jinping's new project for global governance initiative. And they had an actual quote which said, we need to do away with individualism and have the whole world become collectivist. And that's precisely, so you can see this intersection of the Luciferian theosophist occult, secret
Mhm.
societies, and
Yes.
the globalism and the international organizations. And, each deep event that we see, 9/11, it pushed towards collectivism. You're either with us or with the terrorists, things like that, or pandemic. We're all in this together. So it's psychological operations to strip away, attack a death by 1,000 cuts, to strip away our individualism and critical thinking and sovereignty, right?
And eventually they can control us with our peer group. They don't need to put a tank in every corner of every street. They just condition the society, especially through the education center and the education centers, indoctrination centers, schools, and the media. And eventually they put so much pressure that most people just play along. And yeah,
We saw that with COVID. I mean, your peers would shame you. Oh, you didn't get the injection or the
yeah. What
PCR
about
test.
grandmother? What, you don't care about grandmother?
And now the grandmothers are dying. I know grandmothers who have died, and I currently know people. Um, I won't give more details, but that are close, that are dying as we speak. On
Turbo cancers mostly.
yeah, sudden onset, who are otherwise fine. They didn't have markers for cancer in their previous checkups, which I learned this recently. Like, if you go to your annual checkup and everything's fine,
Yeah.
if you do the blood test or whatever, you'll usually have markers that the doctors will tell you, like, okay, there's some sign here that you're on the path to becoming sick. And now it's just these people who were perfectly fine, and boom, you're going to die in a few months. That And these people took multiple, um, medical
Injections.
miracles, so to speak.
Yes,
So,
yes. Unbelievable. And how do you see the integration of AI, especially into governance? How do they going to play that? And what will be the eventual effect? Obviously, it's just going to strengthen their control over every aspect of our life. But if you have more details that you can share with us.
yeah, so I think there's multiple angles here. AI, one of them, you had Sam Altman come out 2 weeks ago, um, say he literally said we need a world government because AI. So I've been saying it's this different pretext for the same solution. The big end game is one world government, and they use the threats. Oh, nuclear war threat, give us world government. Oh, the weather, climate change, give us world
Especially,
government.
yes.
Oh, health, pandemic, give us world government. Oh, AI is going to get out of control, give us world government. So that's AI. They want to use that as the pretext for one world government. Number two, the biggest danger is AI. I don't think it's going to become sentient. It's a tool that makes it much easier for them to sift through the information quickly.
Yes.
And the biggest danger is the agentic, what do they call it? The AI agentic sort of like AI agents. And so that is frightening. So
What do you mean by that?
so what they're doing with AI now is in every imaginable system it's coming, where they're now inserting AI. So Microsoft Windows 11, pretty soon, probably like your Android systems, Apple phone systems, many online platforms that we all use, AI will be inserted, and it's basically going to be Big Brother. So when you look at Windows 11, for example, and I was listening to, I think Rob Braxman recently explained this, where AI will be built in. It will see everything you're doing, and then externally, Microsoft, who's linked up, and then Microsoft probably can share that access with who knows who, intelligence agencies, governments, the World Economic Forum, Nexus. So Microsoft, basically, you're going to have a little devil on your shoulder seeing everything you do, and you can't block that AI agent. So your usernames, your passwords, documents that you're writing, when you log into your financial details, personal photos with your friends and family, that will all be copied by this AI agent. And then Microsoft can, anytime they want, they can just have access through that AI to everything you do, and which effectively breaks encryption, which is the big danger. And then that's the AI. So basically, it's just a spyware. And then, as I said earlier, that third point is they'll be able to much quickly, like YouTube. I multiple times almost lost my YouTube channel. I would frequently got to 2 strikes, and then I simply stopped posting for 3 months. Any podcast to YouTube, I would post them to everywhere else. And how did YouTube detect my thought crime, right? Or my guests' thought crimes? It was the AI. So they can't have a human being listening to every podcast, but the AI was programmed. It can sift instantly through all the information for keywords. So when it
Hmm.
detected, something related to COVID or Ukraine war or climate, it would automatically take down the YouTube video. In some instances, it makes errors, the AI. That's why you can appeal sometimes, and then they'll have a human look at it. And sometimes, if it really was an error, according to their perspective, they will unban you. But if it was, according to the Ministry of Truth, something that they don't want to get out, they will keep it deleted. So, and that's how the AI, I think, is going to. That's the danger of the AI. And they said themselves, when I said global algocracy in 2020, I had read the white paper by Nick Bostrom, who said 5 years ago in his paper, he said we need to have a okay. They call us conspiracy theorists talking about one world. Nick Bostrom is writing a white paper saying we need a one world totalitarian surveillance state government run by AI and algorithms because of all these existential crises, which I just mentioned, and humanity cannot govern itself. So we need rule by AI and algorithm. And just to get one more, to get a little freaky, a spiritual. I think I entertain, I entertain these things. It's speculation, but it's interesting. We'll have to
Hmm.
see. But I wonder if, almost like, the idea of the golem, which I think is Jewish. Golem,
Yes.
if I read this like creature that they build that's made out of clay that doesn't have a spirit, right? It's almost like this mechanical sort of creature. That if this AI that they're building and these cyborgs and these digital gods, if you think of the fallen angels that the Bible speaks of, or demons that don't have physical bodies, but they have spirits, they
Hmm.
possess physical bodies, animals and humans, that if once all is said and done and they build these like cyborgs and these digital machines, if they might be able to be inhabited
You mean to
by,
host
yeah, to
those?
host
Yeah.
these demons or fallen angels. I think it's an interesting thought. It's too early in the game,
It's very
but
frightening one. Yeah.
yeah.
What about the education? Do you see the same kind of pressure in the education to mobilize the population into this new era?
Yeah, I'm removed from teaching. It's been a few years, I think 4 years since I've taught, but have friends who are teachers, and I'm always actively asking them, "What's it like in the
Hmm.
classroom?"
Yes.
Um, and even from the perspective of a parent, You see, or your other friends are parents, you see what their children are doing. And as you said, education, school is one of the key battlegrounds for controlling of the minds, right? I mean, just going back to that example of the Burger King, the older generation refuses to submit to that. We're going to die out. But this new younger generation has been trained to be fully on board with all things digital and cell phones and QR codes, and they think it's normal, and they think you're crazy if you use cash. There was a study the other day, it was a UK or somewhere, that said already 3/4 of like the young generation, 18 to 20-year-olds or something like that, 3/4 are using phone payments, contactless payments. And so, and then in regards to the youth, this year I saw shocking things where um some of the kids that are so we homeschool, we don't have a TV in the home, we keep the screens away from the children, which I think is the most important. And I've realized, many years ago, some of us read about Steve Jobs, who he doesn't give his children a tablet. Maybe you've heard that. Like
Yeah.
the Silicon Valley people said they don't give their children tablets and they don't let them do all this tech stuff, but they're
Yeah.
the guys creating all this tech stuff. And now I see why our kids. I just to give you a silly example. This morning I was waking up, and my kids are young, and for a good like half hour or more, they pretended I was a boat on the bed, and that they were pirates or captains of a ship. And so they're using their creativity, live in the analog world, to have fun with real objects. But the kids now, other kids I've seen, they have these screens, and that's all they do. They're not interested in anything else in the physical world,
Mhm.
toys. They just it's like digital cocaine. Just give me the screens, and then these kids are not motivated. They are stressed, depressed, little children, and so I'm like, it's really destroying the youth, but also the elderly. Like I see old people that no longer can function like they could 20 years ago. It's just the phone in their face. So it's really, it's destroying society.
Not to mention the breakup of the family and a fatherless home, and even a simple thing as rough and tumble to play with your children. It's so important for their development, and all of that is gone. And like you said, it's all just the phone.
Yeah, and then just that, I was just on that point. I was wondering. Um, I was talking with someone the other day. When I was a kid, I went to high school in Croatia. I grew up between USA and Croatia, and kids were on the streets, we're playing basketball, riding our bikes in the neighborhood, all that stuff. And then now, when I look at the same neighborhood in Croatia where I went to high school, when I go back, the streets are empty. Like, I'm not kidding you. It's like there was an alien invasion, and it's in Croatia, it's in the US. And then you wonder, well, what happened between 20 now and then and now? The internet happened, right? So that is kind of like the symbolism of the alien invasion, because now all the kids are on their
We are connected
phones.
now to the ether, so
They
it's
don't have to
part of.
go outside. They live in the
Yeah.
virtual reality, not the real reality.
It's very very sad. Um, it's I would like to ask, do you think that it's basically destroying the civil society and the high trust culture when people are being atomized, sitting with their phone and believing that they actually maintain friendship with virtual nothing? It's like people are waiting for their dopamine strike to get a like, but they are completely isolated, and that's caused despair and all the rest of it. So do you think that obviously that's already also part of the engineering of what we are dealing with, because it's weakening the our society, our cultures, our institutions?
I mean, precisely as you said, I was having this conversation yesterday with a Mexican friend, a young man who spent a decade in the US. So he just came back from the US. And we were discussing this. Like, I was asking him, like, what's your sense of society, family, and friends in the US, in Mexico? A lot of people know Mexico is big on family, right?
Yes.
And I remember back in the 1990s in Croatia, when we would go to Croatia, our aunts and uncles and family. maybe they have small homes, and then we would visit from America from afar, and we would all, like Mexicans, we would find a way, like we'd all cram on the couch and sleep in the living room, but there was that feeling of like, we're going to host you no matter how uncomfortable it's going to be. We'll find a way to fit you in the living room and in the bedrooms with the kids. Like, that's how it's been for most of human history, right?
Yes.
And now you notice it's not the case anymore. And with my friend, we were talking, maybe the current older generation who are grandparents now are still like that in Croatia, and let's say here in Mexico. But the young generation now, kind of what you're referring to, they're really not like that anymore. So this young generation that's been taken over by the Borg, the digital Borg, they're not as hospitable as their parents used to be, even in conservative societies like Mexico. So I think as this new digitally Borgified young generation in some place like Mexico gets older, they'll probably be less hospitable and tied to family than their parents and grandparents. And you see that in America, it's already very advanced. That in America, it's
Yes.
people don't have friends, they don't know their neighbors, they just go to work. And I mean, obviously people have friends, but I'm just saying as a general, the trend where they have less close friends, and it's just work and the digital world and entertainment. But that's all by design, right? Because they don't want us having, as you said, destroy the family, and that's it. There's nothing left, and it's just us as um like cogs in the machine, like production units. And that's why they give us virtual reality now. um People are having virtual boyfriends and girlfriends, chatbots now, which are becoming dangerous. This week I did something for the first time. I used one of those apps to bring back from the dead my grandparents. I submitted old photo,
Hmm.
and then from that old photo, the AI generated 6 seconds of the person like moving, like as if they were alive. And I kid you not, like it was extremely impressive. So it was impressive on the one hand, and I think it's kind of cool. But on the other, I feel like it's crossing some ethical line. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's starting to get weird. So,
Very weird.
yeah.
What do you think is going to happen with the US in the next 10 years? Is the US going to break, like you said, civil war, or is it going to be like some countries, sorry, some states are going to try to call for secession, and then the federal government is just going to become even more violent and more controllable? And what will happen financially in the US and worldwide, in your opinion? Are we, in your opinion, expected any big crisis?
Of course, definitely there will be crisis. I think that's a given. But I'm on the fence, and I've been like this for a long time, and I like to be careful. I found a lot of people in alt media who have a firm belief. They have some theory. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, but if they are just confident in it, they get a lot of followers because people like to hear like someone who knows what's going on. And I'm more cautious where like I don't know everything. And I want to have a more academic approach. And I've had on many renowned academics like a cultural historian Morris Berman, who wrote a trilogy on the collapse of American empire, Johann Galtung, who just passed away in his 90s a few years back, who in 1980 he said in 1990 the Soviet Union will collapse, and it did. He said American empire would collapse in 2025. um I think it's partially correct, partially not. I think we've begun to see some of the cracks, like the financial system. Maybe by now it would have collapsed, but they have used Ponzi schemes to keep it going. So I think he was correct in the sense that it could have collapsed, but they have found ways to keep it going, keep the dead man walking. And to your point, so people talk about it's either going to collapse or it's going to remain a superpower. I think his name was Michael Beckley. He's now kind of like a globalist in Washington. He refused to come back on my podcast, but he wrote a book. I think it was titled "Why America Will Remain the Superpower." And I think there's something to this because I'm going to mix in a little biblical stuff here. But in the Book of Revelation, I think it refers to this beast that takes over the world, and the world, it takes over the whole world, all tribes and nations and languages and rich and poor, and the world asks who can make war with this beast. Like, it's has complete domination over the planet. And so for the longest time there's been this talk of America collapsing, but each time you see it just keeps rolling on. The state of Israel has free reign in the Middle East. Nobody's stopping Israel. The
But
West. Well, okay. I mean, yeah. But I just kind of feel like for now, they're just kind of like doing what they want without consequences. Anything can happen in the. I don't know. Maybe you have a different. You're on the
no,
ground there, but
actually, I think it's not really like that. You might have the impression that that's the case, but for example, just to bring one example to your attention, in the 12 days war with Iran, after the 3 or 4 days, Trump published in his social account that everyone should evacuate Tehran. Okay, now that's very interesting. Why would he say something like that? Israel is doing their best to try not to have collateral damage and to only destroy army and maybe governmental institutions. And he's saying evacuate Tehran, which means that millions of people actually did leave Tehran with their families. Now, ask yourself, why would he do something like that? Because if he didn't do that, people would actually go to the street instead of saving their families. So he actually destroyed our chance to bring down this terrible regime and to help them liberate themselves. Not only that, he demonized us, portraying us as a country that is going to destroy in a discriminatory way millions of people who are absolutely innocent. So I think he did that to sabotage the entire breakdown of the order that they have there, because millions of people went out instead of going to the streets, bringing down the regime. So, and as soon as he came to power, he stopped us from ending what we should in against Hezbollah in the north, and the same with a ceasefire that he forced us to do with Hamas, etc., etc. And I'm telling you, my friends and my family, some of them are serving still in the army. We are not even allowed to fire unless we are permitted and we informed the building in advance that they should evacuate. No other army does that anywhere. So I just thought
maybe a bad example from my end. But then, just going back to what I was saying about the U.S. empire, then
yes.
what they're doing now is, so I can see both scenarios. I can see on the fence where the U.S. declines and collapses in some form and is relegated to the Western Hemisphere. In fact, the Pentagon just last week announced that they're pulling troops from Europe and they're going to to shore up the homeland, maybe in preparation for civil war, and to take control of Latin America, Venezuela,
Hmm.
Mexico, Cuba. I think is soon going to fall. It's disintegrating. I know people who go to Cuba, and to reposition for Asia, China. But my point here is that you mentioned League of Nations, the UN. So we had Bretton Woods. When the UN was created, they created the Bretton Woods system, the
Hmm.
IMF, the World Bank, the World GATT, which became the World Trade Organization, and the gold-backed dollar one world currency. That was, if effectively, if you think about it, that's like the first real leap towards a one world currency was the U.S. dollar backed by gold. That's Bretton Woods one. Everyone knows the story. 1971, Nixon delinks gold, so it becomes the petrodollar effectively. That's Bretton Woods two, right? The oil-backed dollar.
Yes. Hmm.
That we've reached the end of that road. So the first Ponzi scheme now has become the second Ponzi scheme. The debt is becoming exponential. Now what they're trying to do is the Bretton Woods 3.0, which I have said for a long time, and I think there are a few others, and they're trying to now back the dollar by Bitcoin, right? The digital dollar,
Or
energy,
stable coin, right?
right? This is the whole thing with the stable coins linked to what is it? I'm not an expert in this area, although I interview folks where you have like Tether buys the US debt, and then like the dollar is linked to Bitcoin, so they effectively create, like, it's another attempt at a reserve for the dollar, like gold was. This time it will be Bitcoin. And there's a few people like Brent Johnson who recently did a report on this, Santiago Capital, and others, where I think they can succeed. So if they so either it can all collapse and blow up in their face. That's one possibility. I don't dare to know. And the other is that they create these US dollar stable coins, which will dollarize the world, and many, many other countries will begin to use them. And then this will sort of make America an even bigger colossus and superpower. I mean, you already see like Armenia used to be in Russia's sphere. Armenia, Azerbaijan have moved to the West.
Yes.
Trump is going to have, if he hasn't already, the new meeting in Central Asia. And I don't think Russia is doing very well in the war either. Just before I connected, I saw was the UK approved for Ukraine the
Missiles.
military equipment for long range strikes into Russia. And so I could see this other scenario where America becomes, who was it? A smart person giving Luke Groman. I watched his interview over the weekend, who said de-dollarization is U.S. What did he say? U.S. dollar hegemony like 3.0. So I think there's something to this. So you see what I'm saying? So we could have a collapse. Maybe the whole Bitcoin thing will collapse, and then or the U.S. can become like this super colossus. I think of Colossus from Marvel Comics. You know that character,
Hmm.
that can then dominate the world along with its allies. The Anglo-American establishment, the EU. So I can see that as one scenario. But either way, I view the multipolar world as a step towards world government. So I have a beef with some of I call them the multipolaristas, the BRICS crowd.
Yeah.
And they failed to point out that BRICS was coined by two people. I forget, Jim O'Neill, who was Goldman Sachs banker, but they forget the Indian lady. I cannot remember her name, but she was a World Economic Forum young global leader and with Goldman Sachs. So she and Jim O'Neill coined BRICS. And then you look at BRICS, they're all on board with globalist ideology, sustainable development goals, 15-minute cities, digital ID, digital currency. But what's more, I feel like multipolar world would push us towards this idea of a world federation, which was the plan a century ago from the Anglo-American establishment. H.G. Wells, Cecil Rhodes, Lord Milner, they all talked about
The
creating this
round
sort of,
table groups. Yeah.
right,
Hmm.
to create this global commonwealth, which like a world federation, because it's very uneven. The West is more developed and the global South is less developed, and the West has more power. And they kind of need to psyop the global South into getting on board with the global system. And so the BRICS narrative makes people feel like, oh, we're winning against the evil West. And no doubt that, what the Western empires have done has been, they've done, I think they've done some good things. They've done a lot of bad things. So that indignation by the BRICS crowd is righteous, but I think it's playing into the hands, because you can't have a world government unless most of the states have a similar development. Like, again, the EU is the model. So you had the pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain, when they were
Hmm.
beginning integration of the Eurozone, the European Union. Some countries, GDPs and per capitas and all this stuff were off kilter.
They
You
cannot
can't,
compete with Germany, for example.
right.
Hmm.
And you can't have German citizens paying, their taxes, paying for, the development of these poor countries. So they had to decrease the living standards in the richer EU countries to sort of make some equilibrium with the poorer countries. Now use that same model for the global union. And so what
Very
we're
nice.
seeing is this transfer of wealth from the West to the East to achieve some sense of parity. So then you can have the world
It's
federation.
also through the climate change nonsense. As soon as you are minimizing industrial production in the West, you basically allow it in the East. Then you create the equilibrium that you're speaking about.
That's precisely what's happening. I just this morning I was reading who is it like in the UK. I mean, UK and Germany are, it's like they're committing suicide. Like, if any rational person who looks at this, like, this is insane.
Hmm.
They're decommissioning their nuclear industries, all the hydrocarbon type industries. UK just said, Ed Miliband It's like, I don't care where UK Brits are going to lose thousands of oil and gas jobs a month. Um, it's complete suicide, but it's for that specific reason, to allow China and India, the other countries, to accelerate their development as the West declines. Once that happens, then we get world government. That's the main goal.
Wow. Now, the big question is, other of course than taking our children out of the governmental systems and educate them at home, what are the big things that we can do, for example, to secure ourselves from the big brother that is monitoring everything and creating huge database that eventually will help them to consider us as dissidents and to give us negative score, and then of course limiting our ability to interact in society. So what kind of steps can we do, and how do we properly promote the information without falling to become like this alternative media that I would like for you to talk about, as controlled opposition? Because many of the narratives that are that you can hear in the circles of people who are dealing with conspiracies, many of them are really out there. It's no longer makes sense, and basically what it makes people do is to negate themselves. They become irrelevant when they speak about those insane things. So what can we do, and how do we recognize true source of information that we can utilize?
Maybe I'll start with the controlled opposition first. And I've been speaking up this for a long time. I did an episode with a young Canadian Christian, Terry Wolf, a few years back, and I was pointing out how alternative media in recent years has been pushing theosophy, which I referenced earlier, and Gnosticism, and New Age, which for me is a problem as a Christian who believes in a
Satanic,
creator,
completely
right?
satanic.
Who
Yeah.
a creator who is a conscious, personable God, which I think is viewed from, like, from the Jewish perspective, I think of the Torah type Orthodox views, or
Hmm.
from the Christian view, you have this personal God, and these people, because it's funny, the globalist elites, as we mentioned earlier, are effectively transhumanist theosophists, and now you're seeing from the bottom theosophy spreading through alternative media. And I go to many conferences in alternative media, so
Uh,
I've even
Please, can you elaborate about that? How people can recognize the dangers in these new age movements? What should they give attention to, pay attention to?
well, I mean, like, I was just going to give an example. I went to a conference and they're talking. Even one of the speakers was even discussing Aleister Crowley. I mean, are you familiar with Aleister Crowley?
The great beast, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're promoting Aleister Crowley. Um, a lot of it promotes drugs, especially psychedelics. And again, we know this stuff was pushed by the intelligence agencies. Um, and I came with a discussion recently with someone where, if there's a great book by Dave McGowan on Laurel Canyon, how the sex, drugs, and rock and roll was largely manufactured by the military intelligence occult elite.
Hmm.
Where you notice so many of the parents of these rock stars, Jim
Like
Morrison,
Jim Morrison, yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
they were all military intelligence. For example, like, it's you read this book and it's like you cannot come to any other conclusion, and it's well sourced. And you think about, and I used to listen to a lot of rock music. I went to a lot of music concerts, and you notice how in the 2000s rock and roll seemed to die. Right? I mean, we can see now there's not so many there's not really new music, new bands like there used to be, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's all just garbage music today, or people are still listening to the old guys who are still alive,
Hmm.
like Metallica's or U2's or Rolling Stones, who are still. Um, but then it's that the rock died as the internet was going online, and it's almost like the podcasting space, the alternative media space, is like the rock and roll was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So the intelligence agencies, they use that same formula. They created a lot of the musical personalities, they pushed drugs, and now you have in the podcasting space the Tucker Carlsons, the Joe Rogans, the Alex Joneses, who are promoting the narratives that the elites want. And so with drugs, what I was going to mention, psychedelics, LSD, third eye type of stuff. um
Jesus
and
in you. You are the Jesus. You are the Christ.
which is, what does the book of Genesis say? You are God's, right? Which is, I mean, it's a theological, there is a point where in the Bible it says you are God's, in the sense as, you're children of God. So in a way you are kind of like God's, but God is still like the boss in
The
charge.
ultimate authority.
You're
You are not
subject,
becoming a God. Yeah.
right? You're not going to become a God that can do whatever he wants, or
Yes.
she. And so the New Age Gnosticism says that you are gods. They talk about frequencies. A lot of everything's a frequency. There's one universal consciousness. Everything's made of plasma and
Oneness. Yes.
oneness.
Oneness. Yeah.
Everything is one, which like doesn't make sense. I've talked to some of these people to my face. They say, I am you and you are me and we're one frequency. And I'm like, you're on like psychedelics, man. I don't. And Gnosticism, and this is important, the demiurge. So
Yeah.
a lot of people are saying, and this is, you're seeing this now, alternative media spreading rapidly, that Yahweh,
It's a bad
God,
guy. Yeah.
is evil. He's Satan.
Yeah.
And that, this is what they're pushing now. And yeah, so that's that. Those are some of the
Not only
signs.
that, they are actually convincing people to think that the world itself is bad and evil, and we need to escape it.
And it's a
And
simulation. It's a
yeah,
matrix.
simulacra. Yeah, and yeah, it helps them to create this dialectic in which we are completely disconnected from reality itself, and then we are in the realms of ideas and ideologies, and then you can be easily manipulated because you have no, you are not aligned and not attached to actual reality. So it's
and
very
and
helpful for them.
and some of those people, like David Icke, I'll say the name,
Oh
where
my goodness, he's
90% of his analysis is very good when it comes to globalism and world state. But it's like, you put cyanide in a
it's
piece
like
of food, the food
rat
tastes
food.
good. That
Yeah,
1% is going to
90%
kill
food
you.
is healthy. One, yeah, poison.
And Ike tells you, that the moon is a space base, and he talks about this universal consciousness, and that effectively there is no God, right? And I don't see any solution there. And I think all of this, if you read the Bible, everything this Lucifer does is try to get you away from God and to go to hell. And so yeah, there's all that Gnostic New Age stuff. I've even seen on Alex Jones's Infowars. I mean, they're straight out promoting. Michael Flynn. I thought the whole QAnon movement was this occult intelligence psychological operation. And there's a clip of Michael Flynn at some conference reciting a theosophist prayer. So the
The
problem is
invocation, the great invocation, you
something
mean?
like that. And someone found a video from the 1990s of a Luciferian theosophist lady, and what Michael Flynn was saying was almost verbatim what she was saying. So a lot of this Christianity in the MAGA movement I view as false Christianity, and it's actually some occult. It's like an imitation, and it's very theosophist. And then what else was I going to say? That and then when it comes to the conspiracy stuff, they're going off on the deep end with the flat Earth. The Earth is flat. What are some of the other things I forget now? That contagion and infectious disease doesn't exist. Um,
Adrenochrome. Adrenochrome is strong here.
Adrenochrome.
Yeah.
That
The children in the tunnels. We have governments that killed in the 20th century alone 260 million. But the worst thing that we can think about is a few, elite people drinking blood. As soon as you speak about that, you negated your ability to speak truth.
yeah, or the Charlie Kirk is still alive in an FBI witness protection program called Valhalla. Now it's kind of like, okay, wait a minute. I'm open to the idea that somehow something happened where Kirk maybe is still alive, but I'm not going to start. Again, we have to approach it factually. These people who listen to my podcast, a small portion of them think he's still alive, and I've seen other podcasters read their articles about this, and they don't have any sources. It's just very emotional, wishy-washy discussion. And
Yes.
they said, "Oh, he's in this Valhalla protection program." Is there any one source anywhere that credible source that says that there's an actual protection program called Valhalla. No, there isn't. It's
Mhm.
completely made up. It's completely fictitious from the conspiracy realm because people want to believe it. And so I think what's happened is what we've been experiencing has been like CIA type psychological terror. Like, and we cannot underestimate that it's affected all of us to some extent. Like, I went to Croatia for 3 months this summer off grid, because
Mhm.
I think we all of us have some level of spectrum of PTSD, right? Post
Yes.
traumatic stress disorder from the terror events they've subjected us to, plus this information. And so a lot of people, even in the conspiracy world, have gotten like a cognitive dissonance, disoriented. They don't know what is real anymore, kind of to what you were saying before, which I think is part of the strategy of Satan and the globalist elites. So apply cognitive dissonance so nobody knows what is real anymore. And then finally, the lies can be imposed. And so people just, the earth is flat, infectious disease doesn't exist. Like, I've argued with these people. I think largely pandemics are probably not even probable. And, I don't believe in vaccines and all that. But I've had direct experiences where on a micro level, I have witnessed with my own eyes uh, contagion or
Mhm.
infectious disease. And it's not like a big deal. It's like, you know, I've told these types of stories many times, but I can't discard this idea that there is some form of contagion or infectious disease. But you notice a lot of those people in alternative media promoting flat earth or no virus or whatever. What's one thing that they have in common that I've noticed? They're virtually all new age Gnostic and anti Christian. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a weird pattern to notice. So yeah.
Yes. If you can speak a little bit about this term, techno-feudalism, and also how they are selling us on the idea of decentralization and governance and service. If you can just, connect that to the understanding of my audience.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, the digital ID and the 15-minute city idea. So I was living in Kazakhstan when COVID happened,
Hmm.
and we fled back to Mexico. I live in Guadalajara, Mexico, the second biggest city, and we came back here, and I discovered that Guadalajara is a resilient city, and I'm like, what's a resilient city? And I found the documents from the local government, the white papers, that say it's a project by the globalist organizations, and that it's financed by the Rockefeller Foundation. And it's basically to create, like a 15-minute electronic concentration camp. And so when you say, like subscription as a service, effectively, you're seeing everything now. Before, you used to buy software, you pay one time and
It's
you own
yours.
it.
That's it. Yeah.
And now everything is becoming, you have to, you read about cars, BMWs, different car companies who's, you buy the car for 20, 30, 40, whatever, how many thousands of dollars. And to use the seat warmer that's already built in, you have to pay $10 a month. Um, or, products that you buy, vitamins or this or that, they put everyone on these recurring subscriptions. Microsoft now, right? Windows, the Microsoft Office, Adobe. So um, I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly. How are they? Could you just remind me?
I wanted for you to explain the idea of the techno-feudalism, but especially to focus on the idea of decentralization, because many people are thinking that the government is a decentralization many of their services and therefore maybe more freedom, but I doubt it, and I
Right.
would like.
So the techno-feudalism, I've been saying what they want is neo-feudalism. And I just recently found a Rand report. So Rand Corporation is important because I think they're one of the key parts of the globalist brain, Rand. And they had a paper from 2 years ago talking about the U.S.-China rivalry and how they consider since the year 2000, we've entered a neo-medieval age, which
Mhm.
gels with the neo-feudal term or techno-feudalism. So what they want to do is take us back to the Middle Ages. And I found a clip of Tucker Carlson recently saying his favorite form of government is feudalism. And he's an elite pretending to be a populist man of the people. So he does some good interviews, but I do not trust Tucker Carlson. And um, so they want to get rid of the middle class. So that's effectively what we're seeing all around the world now. I see it here in the US, in Europe. The young generation can no longer afford housing. That has been manipulated. So you literally cannot buy a home, the new generation. So they want to get rid of the middle class. So it's just going to be them, the rich, and everyone else, the poor, like, in the Matt Damon movie Elysium. That's the neo-feudal aspect and the decentralized aspect. So I've been looking at this for years, and I recently had a guest on, Ian Davis, who explained this very well, and his book will be published, I think, by the end of the year or early next year. And you see, this goes back to what we're talking about, controlled opposition, alternative media, where a lot of these libertarian projects, they're promoting these free cities, in Honduras, Liberland, in Europe, next to Croatia and Serbia. In the US, you have these projects now, and they're effectively, again, it goes back to neo-feudalism. City-states, like in the feudal times, city-states, where you had feudal lords. And so our feudal lords will be these tech oligarchs, or some people call them broligarchs.
And we mentioned Curtis Yarvin earlier. He wants a monarch, a CEO, right?
He talked about something like an orbital authority, like a world government, which its key sources of power are up in space. All of the tech that is required to surveil and manage everything. Yes. So it's like Elysium. We can't go and destroy the satellites in space. There's none of us plebes would ever. How would we get up there? So they would cement their power in that fashion. And this whole decentralization is a psychological operation, because these people are promoting now amongst alternative media this idea of network states, cyber states. So you can basically create your own communities on the internet and then get together physically. I read an article last week, and it was a mainstream article, where they were saying you can purchase your lifestyle. So you can migrate wherever you want. And so you can purchase the life that you want in this city state. But guess what? What if I don't have enough money to purchase my freedom? That's exactly what it is. So it's going to be costly to live in these privatized city states. So if you got rich on Bitcoin, good for you. You can afford it. But it goes, it's the neo-feudalism. Most of us will not be able to afford freedom. So effectively, freedom will come at a price. It'll be expensive. It goes back to the carbon social credit score system, where maybe people are familiar with that. Where in my bank app here in Mexico 2 years ago, it appeared as a page in the app, a section that was tracking my carbon fingerprint. And I use mostly cash for now, as much as I can. So they have very little on my carbon fingerprint. But the qualifiers that they were using was, energy, your gas use, your electricity use, your travel air mileage. And so just to compare with that decentralized idea and the idea of the city states, the rich. So for example, I have my carbon score. And let's say I buy a plane ticket to go home to America, $500, let's say a round trip. And let's say I want to go again in the same year and buy another $500 plane ticket. I think what would happen was they were going to say, oh, you already bought one $500 air flight. You want to do it again. So it's going to be $500, but we're going to charge you, you've reached your carbon limit. The carbon tax will be $500. So it's going to be $1,000 now. So the rich,
and hey, you ate too much meat, for example.
Yeah, same principle with steak. You bought a $20 steak this week, and you already bought one this week. So if you want another, you're going to have to pay a $20 carbon fee. So it's going to be $40. So the rich they will be able to continue living their lifestyle like nothing happened. Bill Gates can fly on his jet. He can buy carbon offsets. He'll pay the carbon tax. Doesn't matter. He'll buy 5 houses because he can pay the carbon taxes. But for most people, we won't be able to purchase our freedom. I won't be able to buy that second airfare or eat that second steak. Or
I think people are going to consume less and save the extra credit to those rich people. If I didn't eat my meat this month, I can sell that credit maybe to someone else who can pay for it.
Yeah, and to get extra funds or something. And I think effectively that speaks to this idea of these network city states. They're saying, and then okay, you're switching from the public government to a private government. So again, it's that old discussion of fascism and communism, like where you have, or you can have a communist state where all there's a monopoly on power by the government, or you can live, if everything's privatized, you can live in the Bill Gates country, Klaus Schwab country, who want you to eat the bugs and freeze in your home. There's really no difference.
Either way, it's a collectivist ruled by some aristocracy. How do you call it? Like a group of elites.
Aristocracy.
Yeah, aristocracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what they're
So
pushing.
after so many years of research, are you optimistic about the future? Do we have
That's
a chance to, reverse it, to change this predicament?
I have a multi-layered answer.
Hmm.
So, and I don't pretend to know everything. My ideas can change over time. So my default view is that I think we're doomed in the sense, uh, terrestrially speaking. I feel like the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel are going to play out. Things will progressively get worse, but I view that in the end, in the very end, spiritually speaking, God wins. In my perspective as a Christian, Jesus the second coming. So
Hmm.
evil will be defeated. I think by the default state of the universe, truth and light is the default setting. I think a recent guest of mine said something to that standard, and I think that's a good way of saying it. That dark will never overcome light. So I think in the end we win. I don't know when that end is, but I think things will progressively get worse. But that it's always our duty to fight evil, regardless of the outcome. We
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
must resist evil, speak truth, no matter the outcome. I always think of this great quote I have saved on my computer here from Imran Khan of Pakistan, who said in 2010, "If victory is certain, even a coward will fight. But real bravery is when one dares to fight. When defeat is certain." You can use so many examples from history, David and Goliath. You can use the movie, Sparta 300, um,
Yes.
on and on. Game of Thrones scenes come to mind. And I feel like we shouldn't think of the outcome, just fight against this insane evil. Like this weekend in Mexico, I think I mentioned earlier, they killed this mayor,
Yeah.
and
You
people
said
in the
already 7 mayors.
Stay, yeah, and the cat. But this was a mayor who refused to bow down to the narcos, and he was willing to put his life on the line. And I'm like, that's the attitude that we all have to have, regardless of the pain we're going to go through. If you don't subject yourself to the algorithm ghetto, is and people entered the governor's office in Michoacan and started damaging it. Like people, something has started where they're saying the people have had it up to here in Mexico now. So we're at a
Hmm.
point we have an opportunity, if that critical mass can develop and we can start a revolution. I can say this because I'm a Mexican citizen. So when you come as a foreigner, you're not allowed to participate in political protests in Mexico. You can be deported. But I became a Mexican citizen, so now I can I can talk
You
like
can
this.
criticize them. Yeah.
I can't be deported now, but um, a revolutionary moment. So the spark has fuel needs to be added to this fire, and it's up to the Mexican people if they're going to say like enough is enough. Like we can't live anymore. This government is so damn corrupt. So either that spark grows and we see change, or it dies down and we're going to continue with the same. But yeah, just to your question is, I don't think it looks good. I think they're going to advance with the technocracy. I think it's not going to. I think we'll still have wiggle room. I don't think they what they're trying to do. You should have on Jacob Nordengarden if you haven't already.
I had already. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, maybe I forgot. Yeah, I saw on the list. But what he says that what they're trying to do is so anti-human, anti-nature. It requires so much energy. It's not sustainable. Like I think of my life here. my ISP internet frequently breaks and goes down. Um, payments I have to make. My computer fails. My hard drive. I'm on my third SSD hard disk in 4 years.
Hmm.
It's just kind of like everything breaks down. Even all, and so they to implement this will be problematic. And so I think we just have to find alternative systems. It comes down. I always cite Teddy Roosevelt. Do what you can with what you got, where you're at. Community seems to be most important. If you look at in the New Testament, the Gospels,
Yeah,
it
the
talks.
gatherings, they are
Yeah, it said
together. Yeah.
what saved people was the community. You lost your home, but you worked together as a community. So there was one more. So I think it was community is the best solution, because people think about expatriating to other countries. It's going to be the same everywhere. And
You
if you,
didn't recognize any country which will be relatively safer in your, grand research?
I think the formula is to be as rural as possible.
Yeah.
So I think it's less important which country, and more important um, to be further from the cities. But then that changes. Like in Mexico, the problem is, in other countries, maybe you can be more rural because you have more law and order. But in Mexico, you can't go too rural because of the cartels. But then later, when we talk about smart cities, the Palmer Luckies and the Angerols, these companies that are developing Alex Karp's Palantir, they're going
Hmm.
to have drone swarms, and AI. And,
That's why I think it's very important to be in countries which are relatively more poor, because they have less control and less ability to sponsor this kind of control, tight control.
Yeah, I mean, I used to live in Mongolia. I loved Mongolia. I used to speak
Wow.
Mongolian. It's the lowest population density on the planet. That would be a great place to live. My
Hmm.
wife doesn't like cold, so I don't see myself going anytime soon to Mongolia. But that would be a good option if you could integrate and speak Mongolian, and I could do that. I have a community, my old neighbors there, and
Wow.
so. Yeah, but I think everywhere they're going to deploy digital ID, and so you need to have a good community. So because some people want to expatriate, but I tell them, like, okay, where you're going, do you know the language? Do you think you'll be able to at least learn the language relatively quickly and plug in to a
Hmm.
community? Because some people will go to a foreign country and just be by themselves. I'm like, that is the worst thing
Yeah. What have you
you could
done?
do.
You didn't change anything.
They might have money, but at some point, that money, they might have a pile of money in their bank account. They might lose access to that.
Yes.
So but we have to keep fighting. Use protect your privacy as much as possible. I think that's important. I have you work on things like having de-googled phones, having dumb phones, not relying on your smartphone, paying with cash, educating other people, having Linux on your computer, um, just
Read
all
books and, yeah, learn and yeah, keep away from the media and the television.
exactly. And don't listen everything. At this point, I've come to the conclusion. I was at the shop. Where was I yesterday? Buying at Home Depot. I bought some things I needed, hardware, and they're like, "Do you want to donate to the Red Cross?" I'm like, "No, I don't trust any institution. They all tried to kill me during COVID. Schools, banks, businesses, government. Nothing. You're all liars. I'm not going to give you a dime to any NGO unless I know them personally or something. But I'm done with all of those systems. Yeah. So as you say, just educate, create your own sort of virtual reality.
Physical reality. Go outside to the city circle and speak to people. Advocate truth. And that brings me to the most important question. How can we support your work, your incredible work for so many years, and where can we find you?
Geopolitics and Empire.com is the website, and then there you'll find all of my. I post everywhere I can because of the censorship. Audio
Mhm.
podcast players, Rumble, Spotify, no Rumble, BitChute, Brighteon, Odyssey, YouTube, active on X and Telegram, and then the Substack. So if people can become members if they just want to support, but I do a
Yes.
weekly roundup of the news, and then I do calls with supporters every few weeks, just off the record to talk, like get about what's happening, and then what's the other? So that's the Substack for the membership, and then yeah, that's pretty much. If people want to donate, I have some affiliates, and they can consult if they just want to chat with me about expatriating or conspiracy stuff. So yeah, that's basically about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would really like to thank you. I think that the work you're doing is absolutely incredible and important. And actually, I can't even remember anyone who is like I said earlier, a central hub of great thinkers and great speakers. And you are the one who is facilitating all of that. So it's absolutely amazing. And I thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad you noticed that, because that's what I've been trying to do is um, facilitate, like as a teacher, try to find all of these great books and
To
sources
enable.
from
Yeah.
different worldviews and pull them together and to help make the best sense of what's going on. So thanks for listening, and it was interesting to get a mail from someone out in Israel listening to Geopolitics Empire. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. So with your permission, I will end the recording. And thank you very much.
All right.
Okay.